My name's Ian Nicholson. I'm based in Calgary. I'm VP Solutions here at Emerald Associates. I've got 25 years, or probably more like 30 years now, experience all over the world, and I do a lot of work in risk and turnarounds. Joining me today is Sue Familia. Sue's in Wyoming. Sue has many years of experience as well, and she works doing implementations of Primavera, and she's kind of our go-to expert when it comes to P6-Loader. So she's going to do all the heavy lifting today.
Good morning, Ian. It seems we're having some people who are having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Arslan,
Can you hear me okay?
are you able to hear Ian now?
If you go to settings on the left, on the bottom, you have option to look at your audio. You might need to take a look. Or you could try rejoining. I guess if he can't hear, I'll chat him.
Okay. Well, let's carry on.
Okay,
Hopefully he can get connected. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the struggles that people have when they're dealing with P6. P6 has been around for over 20 years. I started working with it in, excuse me, 1999, when it was Primavera Enterprise. And one of the challenges that we've always had with the system is how do we get data in and out of the system in an easy, repeatable way? So let's talk a little bit about the kind of things that happen. So the first one is administering P6. It's very difficult to go through and add users, manage security profiles, all those kind of things in one database. But it's far, far more difficult if you have multiple databases. If you want to make a change in one, you've then got to go make the change in all of the others. And we have some of our clients who have tens of databases. In one case, we have an engineering company client, and their policy is to set up a new Primavera database for each client, just to make sure they've got security under control. So in that case, we end up, every time they have a new client, they've got to create a new database. They've got to move all their security profiles. They've got to move all their users. They've got to move all their layouts. They've got to move everything into this new database. Now, in theory, they could make a template database and just keep reusing it, but that would be a lot of work just to set up in the first place. And if you make a change, you've got to make it everywhere. So P6-Loader allows them to go through and copy all those settings from one database to another. So you create a new database, you copy your users over, you copy your security profiles, your layouts, everything else. Makes things very easy. The next thing is developing projects. Now, in P6, they used to have a wizard that you could run that would help you create a new project, a little size and complexity wizard, they called it. But it wasn't that useful. And you can create template projects in P6. But if you want to actually create a project from your estimates, for example, it's not that easy to do. Whereas with P6-Loader, you can create a project from Excel anytime you want. So you could dump your estimated man hours, the work you need to do, the activities, the milestones, everything into P6-Loader, and you can very quickly create a project. The next one is data integration. So I mentioned that people have estimating tools, but maybe you also have an ERP system, or you have an EAM, an enterprise asset management system, and you want to be able to get your data from that system into P6. Now, some tools like SAP or Oracle Financials have pre-built integrations that you can buy, but many tools don't. So it's a real struggle if you can't just buy an off-the-shelf integration. And by the way, if you're using SAP and you want to buy an off-the-shelf integration, it's going to cost you $250,000. So we need a way to move data in and out of P6. We know P6 needs to communicate with our other systems. P6-Loader is a great way to do that. And even if you want to develop your own integration, like hard code something down the road, P6-Loader is a great way to test your data flows, because what you can do is you can simulate the data transfer back and forth through Excel. Team engagement. This is one I used to struggle with quite a bit, because we have all kinds of users out there in P6. We have the professional schedulers who think P6 is easy to use because they used to use P3, which was really not very user-friendly. And then we have casual users who use P6, once a month to update a few activities. And those people will often find that P6 is really difficult for them. If you don't use it every day, it's actually quite a steep learning curve to try and get yourself up to speed on P6. So P6-Loader will allow you to use Excel as your tool for these casual users to input their progress. You can pull out the activities, split them up, send them out to people. They can update their progress, send it back, and you upload it and you're done. So again, the idea is let's get people who aren't schedulers and really don't want to be in P6 and get them engaged in the process. Consistent portfolios. This one's kind of interesting. This is a fairly new thing that we're seeing, and that's that people want to make Primavera data part of their enterprise data lake or data mart or whatever they want to call it. So people have these systems for dashboards where they pull information from SAP, they pull information from Maximo, they pull information from any other system that they happen to have, and they need P6 information as part of that. Well, in order to do that, we need to set up consistent coding structures across our organization. So that means we need to be able to go in and set a standard set of project codes, a standard set of project user-defined fields, maybe a standard set of activity codes. And if you haven't done that in the past, it's a real chore to go back and backfill that. So P6-Loader will allow you to go back and do it en masse very quickly and very easily. So how does it work? So the first thing is P6-Loader can be on-premise. So if your P6 is in your own data center, or it's on your computer even, or in your trailer, wherever it happens to be, we can support that. We can also have a cloud setup. So if you're in the Oracle cloud, or you're hosted with Azure or OCI or anybody else out there, AWS, we can actually put P6-Loader in the cloud as well. We can also do a hybrid. So you can install P6-Loader within your company and connect to a cloud database, or you can put P6-Loader in the cloud and connect to a company database. It's very flexible, and that's because we use Primavera's APIs and or their web services. So depending on which one's going to be more appropriate for your situation, we can set P6-Loader up to work with it. So let's talk about different ways that you can get information in and out of P6. So let's talk about the ones that people classically use. So the first one is the XCR process. So XCR is Primavera's proprietary export-import file format. It's basically just a large flat file that has all of the information in it about your project. And a lot of people have come out with tools that will let you manipulate an XCR. So you can change coding, you can change all kinds of different things in the XCR tool. And then you can import that in, and P6 doesn't really check it. So you can have multiple projects in your XCR, but there's some challenges there. The first one is that the XCR has no global information in it. So if you want to change user profiles, or you want to copy user profiles from one database to another, the XCR is not going to help you. The next thing is that there's no security around the XCR. So in order to be able to import from an XCR into an active project, I need to be a project super user, which means I can do anything I want. So there's nothing to stop me changing things that I probably shouldn't be changing. The next challenge is data validation. There is none. So we had a situation a few years ago where an engineering company and an owner were transferring information back and forth via XCR. The engineering company used the owner's codes as EPS codes. They wanted to make them global codes in the owner system. So somebody helpfully went in, opened the XCR in Notepad, and changed all the EPS level definitions in the XCR to global. except they spelt global wrong in one place. Well, when the client imported the file, everything seemed to be fine until they logged out and logged back in. And when you log in, Primavera reads the activity code dictionary, came across this word global spelt incorrectly, didn't know what to do, and just shut down. And every user that logged out and logged back in had the same problem. And it took us hours to figure out exactly what had gone on. So you have to be very careful when you're working with an XCR. Oracle will not support you if you screw up your database that way. So if you say, well, I was importing this project and it broke my database, Oracle's going to say, well, you're on your own. The other thing is you can't selectively extract information. You extract the whole project or nothing. Okay, so there's a bunch of drawbacks to using XCRs. The next one that Primavera came up with more recently was XML import-export. Well, this is a little better. So this does validate the data that comes in. It lets you make changes as long as you only have one project at a time. Anyway, you can use it on multiple projects, but all the data manipulation functionality, like can I want to change my calendar from a resource calendar to a global calendar, for example, that disappears as soon as you have two projects in there. So still not great in terms of functionality. And we hear all the time from people who've used the old SDK. So SDK stood for Software Developers Kit. It was a very old tool that Primavera put out probably in the mid 2000s to allow people to bring information in and out of P6. And people still use it today, but it's no longer supported by Oracle. They basically say, hey, you can use it if it works great. If it doesn't and breaks something, you're on your own. So that's not great. The other thing with the SDK is you have to be a global super user to use it. So again, the whole issue around security goes out the window as soon as you're using the SDK. And finally, there's a P6 Excel import, which people have used. It has some good points and some bad points. It does validate the data, which is good. It is supported by Oracle, which is good. It allows you to decide what you want to extract, which is also good. However, it only does one project at a time. And again, it's project data. It's actually activities, resources, that sort of thing. It's not anything global. So again, you don't have the ability to manage your global data. Whereas P6-Loader does all of those things. So as you'll see in a minute, we allow you to access all your global data. Your P6 security profile is what manages what you can and cannot do. So if I'm a project super user on one project, but I have read-only access on another project, I will not be able to load anything into that second project using P6-Loader because P6 security would stop me. All the data is validated. It is supported by Oracle because, as I said before, we use the API and web services. You can decide what you want to extract, and you can extract as few or as many projects as you like. So the areas that P6-Loader works in, so I mentioned before global data such as security profiles. We can work with resources and roles, projects and activity information, and we've also put some utilities in there to help you manage your P6 system. So there's a whole bunch of different subject areas that are in here. And Sue's going to talk about a lot of them. I don't want to go through the whole list here. Just a couple of things though, the utilities that we have, we let you roll down activity codes. So you can make an activity code from a project code to an EPS code or an EPS code, or sorry, from a global code to an EPS code or an EPS code to a project code. You can read XCRs if you want to. You can clean up the XCRs to get rid of the POBS elements and the risk types. You can run job services. So one of our clients, they load huge updates every weekend using P6-Loader, and at the end, the last job they do is to run the job services and reschedule all the projects. You can roll down calendars, so you can take a global calendar and roll it down. You can move layouts or reports from one database to another, and you can back up your data, okay? Now, as far as what sort of modules we have, so we have global topics, user topics, and project topics. When it comes to projects, you can extract one project or many projects. You can extract your baselines and update them or change them or whatever you need to do with them. No more using that horrible baseline update utility. And you can update your resources and your expenses. Once you've extracted it, you can do whatever you need to do in Excel. You can run macros, you can put formulas in, you can integrate it with anything else. When you're done, you load it back to P6 and you're all good. So let's take a look. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn over to Sue, who's actually going to show you what the tool looks like. Okay, Sue, you should be
Thanks,
getting
Ian.
control.
Yep. So we had a few questions while you were talking, so I just want to address those before I get started. So we had a question about how the program worked with Procore integration. So with integrations, most of the programs that you have will dump out to an Excel file. Then you would just need to run a macro, write a macro, whatever, to change that information so that it's readable by P6-Loader, and then you could load it in. So we have a lot of clients that do this. They get that Excel dump from their, say for instance, their Procore software, and then run a macro on it, and then load in the information using P6-Loader. So another one is the other question was that we have, is P6-Loader a separate license? Yes, it is. It is sold on a subscription basis. So it's basically by the volume of data that you're pushing back and forth. And it's not a user license type of thing. Any user that is included in your P6 environment can be a user of P6-Loader as well. So just wanted to clear those up and to answer those questions before I got started. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can take a look. Okay, so P6-Loader is accessed by a URL. And one great thing about it is that if you have multiple databases that you're working with, you can point P6-Loader at those databases and then just go in one place and select the database that you want to work with. And then you're able to log in and work with that information. So I didn't come into the main menu. So we have our main area here that we come into. But I think the best way to kind of get your feet wet a little bit is to look at extractions and what kind of data you can handle with P6-Loader. So in our extraction area, you'll see on the left-hand side here that we have modules for each subject area. So we have user information, all your global information can be worked with, roles and resources. We've got risk information. I'm going to come back to usage sheets in a moment. We have project information as well as activity information. So these are all the areas that you can handle data in with P6-Loader. Now, when we're talking about administration, and perhaps you've had your database for quite some time and you've been working in it, and maybe you've got some some data that just isn't being used anymore. Those older projects, you've changed coding, maybe you've added coding, etc. These usage sheets here are a utility that you can use to analyze your data and where it's being used, how often, and so you could go out and run these sheets, and what it would tell you is, is this piece of data being used, what project it's being used in, and how many times. So these really help out with kind of managing your database and keeping it a little tidier. So those are very useful. Now, if we're talking, first of all, I want to talk about some of the maybe the administrative things that you might want to do. So let's say users, we have users that are in the cloud, and sometimes it's not all that easy to get your users set up in the cloud. you have to log in, you have to add them, you have to, set them up, things like that. Or if you need to add like a global profile or a project profile, it's just a little bit cumbersome. Now with P6-Loader, what we can do is we can actually pull out what we have there, and we could edit it, or we could also create new profiles and things like that. So I'm just going to select a couple of these and show you what it looks like when we pull out data from P6 using P6-Loader. So I'm going to go ahead and extract it. I marked the modules I wanted to extract. And when this is completed, I can download it, and it's going to open it in Excel for me. So you can see here, I've got, my global profiles. These are all my global profiles that are out there. It has all of my, default settings, anything that I want to put as security for that global area. I could also do project profiles. We can handle all the users in there. So if you're needing to add users, it's really easy to go in and just add the user and load it in, and you'll have all of these settings. You could copy and paste another user, things like that. We could also assign, of course, that user OBS information. So what EPS notes do we want them to have access to, and what type of access do we want them to have that? And then, of course, we can set up their resource access as well. So let's say, for instance, I want to, first of all, let me show you the database that I'm going to work with. So this is the web version, and I have some things I need to do with my users here. I need to set up a new global security profile, a new project profile, and I have some users that I need to add, as well as I want to retire, so to speak, this user, Paul Kim. Now in my sheets, when I take a look at these, I have some colors on here that are going to help coach me as I work with each one of the sheets. So my modules are going to come out in different sheets in my workbook. And when I do that, I'm going to see some colors on my headers here. Now, if I have a red background on my column here, this is telling me that for this module, my mandatory piece of information for this particular module that I have to have is a global profile name. So I have to have that. Now, anything gray or blue is optional. So when I have my gray and blue here, if it's something that I don't need to deal with right now, I could remove it from my sheet. I could add in some things and use, and then in this case, it's not going to be pertinent, but if you needed to calculate numbers, things like that, I can certainly do that. So I'm going to add another global profile called P6-Loader 2 to facilitate my new users. I'm also going to set up some new project profiles. So these are going to be that EPS level security. And then what I'm going to do is I've pulled out Paul Kim, and I'm actually going to retire him. I'm going to remove him from being able to use P6. So I'm going to, take away his licenses that he had. I'm going to mark him as no longer, or move him to the area that is no longer a P6 user, and I'm going to retire him. But at the same time, I'm going to add these two users up here as new users, and I'm going to assign them that new global profile as well. And I'm going to, of course, give them the licensing that they need over here in the license area. Now I'm going to assign those new users their project security. So they're going to be able to see that OBS, or that responsible manager, assigned to Oracle Tools. And I'm going to use, again, that new profile name that I'm creating for that, that level of security. With Paul Kim, what I'm doing is I'm taking it away. I'm removing these. And the way that you can remove information with P6-Loader is that we have a column called delete record. And beside any record that you would like to delete, you just merely put delete in, and then you are able to delete as well with P6-Loader. I'm going to give my new users resource access, and I'm also going to create resources as well at the same time. So you can see here, like in the resource area, that I do have 2 columns that are mandatory. So these are columns that I must have in my resource area. So depending on what module it is, you may have one, you may have several pieces of information that you need to have mandatory on that sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to load this up with P6-Loader. Well, wrong place here. And the way that I do that is I save the file, and then I put it where I can browse to it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my area where I have this file, and I'm going to select the file. And then because I do have deletes on this one, kind of as a fail safe, I need to check mark this enable deletes here. So that's going to allow P6-Loader to delete that information. So it's kind of like our safety net, so that you are confirming that you want to do those deletes. Then I can simply upload that file. It's going to go out. It's going to tell me that it's processing it, that it's creating and deleting what I need it to. And then when I go back into P6, if I refresh it, it's going to go out to the database, going to get the information I need. And so I have my P6-Loader area where Paul Kim is no longer. He's actually been moved down to this no longer using P6. And then I've got my new global profile here with my new users in it, their resource access, their modules are checkmarked, everything. So this is a really fast way to be able to use to create users and other items at that administrative level. Now, another administrative tool that is very handy, especially when you are cleaning up your database, is the code roll down. We can do this also with calendars. So in P6, you can promote calendars and you can promote global activity or activity codes up, but you cannot demote them. And in some cases, you do end up having multiple lists that get created unbeknownst. One user creates that, another user doesn't realize it's there, creates another one. So you can see here in this project that I kind of have kind of a mess here. So I have my phase code, and that phase code really doesn't need to be at my global level. It needs to be at my EPS level. That's really where it's important. It's only important for a group of projects under a certain EPS. Now, with my equipment, I've found that I have 2 different codes that have been created, one at the global level and one at the EPS level. And they've actually been assigned in my project here. So I need to handle those. I want to combine those, and I actually want that equipment to reside at my EPS level. Now I also have 2 specs codes. Now these specs codes, again, have been duplicated at the same level, but given a different name. So I want to combine these, and actually my specs are only important at my project level. So I'm going to push those down to my project level at the same time. And then of course I have my work order. My work order is only important to this particular project. So I want to move this work order code down to the project level. So the way I would do that is I would use my activity code roll down sheet. And what I can do here is I can define the code that as it exists right now in P6. I can tell it what level I want it to be pushed down to. And then I can choose to give it a new name or not. In this case, I am going to give it a new name for my phase, and then I'm going to assign it to the EPS. Now with these ones that I want to combine, I have my two equipment codes here. I would tell it where they reside right now, where I want to push them down to, and then to combine them, I would give them the same name and roll them down to that same name. So that's going to combine those dictionaries, and it's going to reassign those values in my project for me based on this new code. Same thing with my specs code. Define where it is right now, tell it what level I want to push it down to, this case the project, and I would give it the same name so that it combines those dictionaries, and then also give it the project I want it to roll it to. Now with my work order, I don't want to rename it in this case. So all I'm going to do is tell it that I want to roll it down, and it's going to keep that same name because I'm not giving it a new name, and I'm going to roll it to my project level. Now this last column is asking, what do I want P6-Loader to do with the original code? Do I want to delete it or do I want to keep it? So I want to make sure that my phase equipment and my specs, that I've handled all of my instances with this. So for now, I'm going to keep those, and so I can do some more analysis on these before I delete them. But in the case of my work order, I know that that is the only work order there. So I'm going to actually delete it at the global level. So I'm ready to load this sheet. I can go into P6-Loader. And I can upload the file. So I'm going to browse to it. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to tell P6-Loader to push those, handle those codes as I have set out in my sheet. So now that that's done, I can go back to P6. I can refresh my data again so that it can retrieve what it has in my database. And you can see, of course, those are no longer assigned there. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to add my columns. So at my EPS level, I now have my equipment that's been combined. I have my new phase code at that new level. In my work order, I can tell my work order has been deleted, so it did what I wanted it to there. And then for my activity codes, I have my specs and my work order that I want to bring over from the project level. So now I can see that they have been pushed down, they've been reassigned, they've been combined, as the case may be, in the specs of my and my equipment. And I also have my work order now there. So really handy to be able to clean up your data using those roll downs. And like I said, we can do this with calendars as well. So let's talk about the more, I guess, project level type of information. So I have a new project, and I need to develop this entire project. I have codes I need to put in to create for it. I have resources I need to create, and I need to just basically go and create this entire project. So I'm going to, let's go over and look at our resources here as well. So for this particular project, what I want to do is I want to build out this P6-Loader area a little bit more. I have some more resources that I need for this particular project that I'm developing. I also need to create some resource calendars, things like that. So if I go in and I take a look at my new user or my new project development, I'm going to handle a lot of information in this particular load. Now, I don't need to do this if I don't have this information all at once. I can piecemeal this in if needed, but right now I do have all this information, so I'm going to go ahead and create it for my project. So I can build out my WBS. I can put some hierarchy in there. I can, name it. I can put my responsible manager if I need to on each one of those. and I can set all of those settings that I might want to set on my WBS. Now for this project, I need to create some new activity codes. These are going to be project level activity codes. So I'm going to create a discipline, area, and work package activity code. And then I'm going to populate it in a different sheet so that I have some values in my dictionary. So I can set that up. Now I'm going to start building out my activities. So I've got my activities here. I'm telling it what WBS I want it in. I'm giving it an ID. And I'm also using the functionality in Excel to help me build out my activity name. So what I've done here is I've used a concatenate. I've used a formula to create my activity name. So I'm going to use the information from my title column here. Now, title is not a column that P6-Loader recognizes. So when it's loading, it's actually just going to skip over this title column and not load that information because it doesn't really know where to put it. But I can still leave it in here so that my concatenation works. And then I'm going to use my area project code as well as my work package project code. So when I use a formula in P6-Loader, I don't have to copy and paste the values. P6-Loader is going to use the result of that formula and load that result in. So I don't have to do any changes to my formulas in order for it to be successful to load that formula result into P6. I'm going to set up some expenses for my project. I'm going to need some new cost accounts for this particular project. So I'm going to go ahead and set those up so that I can assign them. I have a few activities that need some steps. So again, another place I could use the functionality of P6 or of Excel. Let's say I have the same steps that I need on several activities. I could simply copy these. I could paste them down here, and then I could perhaps take this particular activity and just fill it in and use the functionality of Excel to help me out there. Now, I do need a resource calendar, a new resource calendar for this particular project for some of my resources. And this is a rotating calendar. So if you've ever tried to set up a rotating calendar or a complicated calendar in any case in P6, it is a little challenging because you do have to pick and choose what days off, what days on, etc., and hope that you've counted right and when you're setting those and things like that. So with P6-Loader, we can make this a lot easier using the functionality of Excel. So I'm going to set up the basis for my calendar, do my hours per day, month, week, etc. Then I'm going to set my work time on my calendar. So potentially we could work Sunday through Saturday from 8 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. And then I can handle my exceptions. So with my exceptions, having 10 days off or on and then 4 days off, with my exceptions, I can use again a formula. So I've got my first day off that it's going to occur in my calendar. And then for the next days, I'm actually going to use a formula to calculate those next 4 days. And then when it comes to my next set of days off, I'm going to use a formula there as well. So I'm going to take the last day of my previous day off. I'm going to take the 11th day as my next day. So we're going to work 10 days and then be off on the 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th day. So I've used the functionality of Excel to help me calculate those days. So I'm not having to count in the calendar and do that. That's actually going to allow me to create those very easily. Now I also need a new resource type or resource code for this particular project on this contractor. I'm going to set up my values for that resource code, and I can even put a hierarchy in on there as well. Now for my resources, I'm going to build out my resources. I'm going to use that rotating calendar that's being created at the same time. So with P6-Loader, you can see, I'm going to load a lot of information. P6-Loader knows the order in which to load the information in order for it to be a successful load. Because we know, of course, the calendar needs to be set up before we can actually assign it. So P6-Loader knows what order to set up that information, regardless of the order of what you have down here in your tabs. And then, of course, I'm going to assign some of the information I need for my contractor, such as that new contractor code. I have a location and a direct indirect and a plant code for my resources. Now, once I have my resources, of course, I'm going to want to assign those resources to my project or to my activities. So I can assign those. I can utilize both my resource and my roles if I need to. I can do my duration on those. I can get a cost out there, and then I can start. Whoop, went a little too far there. And then I can start building out my planning for these particular resources as well. Now, of course, we have our logic through our schedule. Now, we can handle logic even cross projects. So we have these mandatory fields where we need to identify the project that we want to connect to, as well as the activity ID. So it's very easy to take cross-project relationships. Let's say you utilize contractor resources or contractor schedules, and you need to tie those schedules into your main project. Now, you could save those ties, and when you bring in that new project from that contractor, it's very easy to load in those cross-project relationships that you already have set up and saved in with P6-Loader Sheet. That's going to make it very easy for you to tie those cross-project relationships together. But of course, you can go from within the project as well. You can set your type as well as define any lag that you have on your relationships. Now, in the way of resources, we can also handle, of course, those rates for your resources. So I have 2 shifts. I have my 7 a.m. and my 7 p.m. shift. I could, again, use that functionality in P6 or in Excel to concentrate. Maybe I just wanted to go across all of my 7 a.m. Items here. I can go in, I can concentrate on those. I can concentrate on maybe my 7 p.m. shift, set up everything I need there, and then I'm able to load them all at once and bring them into my project and into my P6 database. So a lot of information there, but I am going to load those all at once so that I can start developing my project. So I'm going to browse to the file again and upload the information that I need for my project. So as it's going through, it's going to tell you what you're doing, where you're going, and what is being processed at that particular point. Oh, and it looks like I have an error. So it's going to tell me that I have an error. So it looks like I have some roles that are missing there. So it's going to tell me what sheet I have it on, where it's finding the problem, and it's going to tell me the row of that sheet that's having an issue. So I can very easily go in and I can take a look at any problem that I might be having with this particular load. Now, even though it had an issue with the resource assignments in this particular in this area, it still loaded everything it could load. So I can go back and fix these. I can reload it and correct it. However, I'm going to show you that even though it wasn't able to do that, those couple of items on there, it still was able to load everything else. So if I refresh my data, even with those errors in there, it's going to come out, and now I can see that I've built out my resource tree here a little bit further. I've used my calendar that I created, my resource calendar. In my activities, I have all the rest of my information that's there that it was able to load. I have my logic, I have my resources, I have the roles that it could load. And then I've got, of course, my planning coming in here, as well as my cost accounts as I need them. Now, what I would do, and I'm not going to do it during the presentation here, but I would go back, I would go to my page here, and I would go to my resource assignments, and I would take a look at what might be my problem here. So I have, it says it's on row 2. So this is my row 2, and it was having trouble with this resource ID. I might want to go and investigate. Maybe this role, or I'm sorry, the role ID. So maybe this role is not set up. Maybe I need to set that up before I assign it, so I can investigate. And then I would only need to handle those few pieces of information that P6-Loader was having a problem with. So another thing that is kind of handy with P6-Loader is that I can deal with baselines without really having to detach them, go through that utility that is within P6 that is a little bit cumbersome. And I don't know, I just don't trust it all the time when I use it. So with P6-Loader, I can pull out baselines. I can change information in them. I can add information to both my project and like if I have found work, to both my project and my baselines. And I can move around my costs, my units, whatever. So I can make changes without having to, like I said, detach or use that baseline updater. So the way I would do that is I would pull out my baseline information for my project. So you can see I have my baseline 1 here that I've pulled out. And these are all the activities that are in my baseline 1. Now I wanted to make some changes. I wanted to do some debit and crediting of my project baseline here, or my baseline 1. So on these highlighted ones, this is where I am debiting and or crediting that particular cost, as well as the units. And I've used functionality in Excel to calculate that for me. So when I pulled out the information, this column is what was originally in my project. I've added an additional column to help me with my calculation. And then I'm going to load back, because I've named it planned labor cost. It's going to load back this information to P6 for me to adjust those particular costs and units on those couple of activities. Now with my found work, not only am I adding it to my baseline, but I'm also going to add it to my project here as well. So I'm not going to put any costs or units in there. I just want to realize the man hours on this found work. And now I'm ready to load that in. Now, I don't have to load back every single line of my baseline here. All I need to load back, and I'm just going to use the color to help me filter those out. The only thing I would need to load back on this particular sheet are these couple of lines, because that's the only changes I'm making. So I don't need to load back all that other repetitive information. I can just load back what I want to change. So I'm going to go ahead and load that in there. And we're going to see where we have our information that is updated on our project. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And I have my found work here. I can see by my work scope that this was added work that's in there. And then I've got my debits and credits that have come through, and it looks like I had some stuff in here already, so I must not have cleared out very well. But I have my changes that have come through, and here's one that did come out how I anticipated. And I have my difference of my 180 here. These other ones looks like I didn't clear out my information properly the last time I ran this, but it does come through and it makes changes to your baseline there. Now, one other thing that we have clients that find is helpful is updating projects. Perhaps you have users who do not necessarily use P6, and but you do want to get information from them about the updates on their projects. Now, these are two very small projects, just for the example that I have here. But I have two projects that I'm going to get my first update on, and maybe I have several people that I need to send these out to. If I had perhaps a code that would allow me to separate these when I pull them out, I could utilize that when I pull out the information for this update. So in P6-Loader, when I do an extraction, what I can do, let's say I want to extract the information for those particular projects. What I can do is on my sheets, the ones that have the little pencil next to them mean that I can decide what columns I'm actually going to pull out. So if I went into my activity and I didn't need to have a lot of these dates in here, maybe I don't need the type or the status. Perhaps I don't need a leveling priority or a duration type or any of these items in here. What I can do is I can actually select these from the right hand. The right hand, it's just like P6. The right hand side is what is going to show, and the left hand side is what I'm not going to show, but may be available. I can move those all over. And so I don't need any planning information when I'm doing updates. Well, maybe I need my planned start date. So I can move these over, and I can set up exactly what I want to pull out on my columns. So I could do that. I can define the user defined fields that I want to pull out. If I don't want any, I can move them all to the left. On my codes, I can pick and choose which code I would like to pull out and which one I don't. So I can move those over as well. Now, the beauty of this is that once I have this set up, I don't have to do it again. I need to use this over and over again for my updates. I need to pull out the information. I can actually save that definition and I can use it again. So let's say I want to do my project updates. I've saved this particular definition and I can load it up. So it's just asking me if I want to discard anything I have out there now, and I do, and it's going to apply that. So for my two projects, what I'm going to pull out on my activity is my project ID, my name, my percent complete, my actual start date, my actual finish date, my planned start, planned finish, suspend, and resume. Now, I'm not going to pull out any user-defined fields, nor am I going to pull out any codes in this case. It's saved that for me, so I can use it over. And then it's also going to save the particular projects that I want to pull out. So I'm working with these two projects. So I would submit this. I'm not going to do it because we've already seen how we can extract, but I can use this over and over again when I'm going to do a new update on my project and send it out to my team. So when I get it back, they can send it back to me and they can have filled in the information that I needed for this particular update. So when I got this back, I can see that I have a couple of milestones that have been completed. I have a couple of activities that are in progress. I've got the percent on there. I've got my actual start dates. And I always include my planned start date because it makes it very easy for the person who is doing the updates to simply copy and paste that and then change the date if they need to. They already have that format there. They're able to use that format. And then if they do need to change it based off of when it was planned, they can just go in and change the date in that copied area. So I'm ready to actually load this in. Now, another thing we can do is we can load these in buckets. So we could do this monthly. We could do it by financial period. So I can see that on my earthworks here, I had some units that were done in May, and I have some that were done in June. Now, for this whole activity down here, this FS spread 3, I had all of my resources that incurred units or have actual units that I need to load in June. So I'm going to take care of that at the same time. So if I go in and load this sheet, once it's complete, I can go in and I'm just going to show you the calendar. I used fiscal periods for this one. I'm going to show you the fiscal periods that I had on those two activities that don't have anything right now. And then when I refresh my data, it's going to come out. It's going to show me that I have my completed milestones. I've got my in progress activities, and I was able to load those actuals in the proper financial period where they belonged. So really easy to send a sheet like this out to your team, have them update what they need to, and send it back to you so that you're able to update your projects very easily. So did we have any questions as we were going? I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to you, Ian, so you can wrap it up. And while you're doing that, I will answer some of the questions that are here. So we are going to share the recording of this webinar. So those of you who are asking about the recording will be able to do that. P6-Loader does work with both standalone and enterprise, so you can deploy it. Oh, and it looks like Ian answered that. So go ahead, Ian.
All right. Thanks, Sue. Just wrap up real quickly here because we're short on time. So we always like to get feedback from our customers. One of the ones I always like to mention is the one down the bottom that says, "We finally got P6-Loader. I love it and wish we did this 2 years ago." This is for a client that took me over 2 years to convince that they really needed to buy P6-Loader. So yeah, we get some great comments from different people. These are from some planning engineers. We've got clients all over the world using P6-Loader, so we're quite proud of that. We've got clients in Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Europe, Kazakhstan. So we basically have clients all over the world using this tool, which is really great. We're also a full service Primavera shop, so we can help out if you need tools. We have other Primavera tools as well. We do implementation and integration services, and we do training as well. So if any of those things are of interest to you, please reach out to us. We've been an Oracle solutions provider since 1995. We've been a partner since 2000, or platinum partner since 2009. And we've got a team that's spread all over the world in different places. So again, we'll open it up if there's any other questions. I think we've answered the ones that are out there right now. Let me just look in the question section. Yeah, it looks like we've got everything. We'll stay on for a couple minutes. If anybody has any other questions they'd like to ask, you can throw them in the question section or in the chat. And in the meantime, I'll put our contact information up here. So Sue's contact information is here. So if you have specific questions or you'd like to talk about the scenarios that you could use P6-Loader for, and maybe Sue can show you how that works, feel free to reach out to her, and she'd be happy to help you out. And while we're waiting, just to go on about the question about does it work on standalone P6? So the difference is there, if you're using PPM, which is the lighter version of P6, which is the client only, that doesn't come with a web services license from Oracle. You can buy one for about $500. If you have EPPM, but you're running it standalone, then you would have the ability to to run it no problem at all. And if you're on a SQLite database, you'd have to upgrade to the Oracle XE database, which is relatively simple and there's no additional cost to do that. Someone's asking, can we use it without an internet connection? So we do have a version we call the high security version of P6-Loader for our customers who can't access the internet. So normally what happens with P6-Loader is when you go to run it, it does a little check on how many points you have and how many are available, and it does that by pinging our server. But we have some clients, particularly in defense and power generation industries, and things like that, where that's not feasible. So in that case, we have a version that works on premise, and then we just basically once a month we have a little process you run that trues up the points. So we do have a version that can run if you have a network that's disconnected from the internet. All right, looks like that's all the questions we have so far. All right, so thanks for joining us today. Again, our contact information is here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And as I said, we can also dive into your situation and discuss how you could use P6-Loader. What we do find is that people who start using P6-Loader use it more and more just because it's such a great tool and it makes things so much easier working with P6. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks for